Pay close attention. The news you're about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, in the news this week, Catan, definitely Venezuela. President Maduro is a very hot topic. He's trying to hold on to his presidency as the interim president, Juan Guaido, gets support from the U.S., now actually getting the resources that were going to President Maduro. Now they're coming to him. So that is still a very heated area of the news. Also, we have third trimester abortions, saying that a baby could be aborted all the way up and including the birth of that child if they're saying the mother is affected. So we'll have those very controversial statements. And also then President Trump and his own team of advisors, he is now wanting to get rid of. And these are the ones that bring all the intelligence. But the strange thing is, Catan, he himself picked them. Wow, now saying doesn't want to have anything to do with them. But first, the Catholic Archdiocese of Texas just released the names of 309 priests who they say are credibly accused of sexually abusing children. Now, the accusations date back as far as 1950. Among those listed is Father John Keller. For many years now, Keller has been ministering at one of Houston's most prominent churches, the Prince of Peace. Now, the news comes as a surprise and a relief to two men who say they were abused by Keller as children.
Yes, John Labonte took his accusations to the church in 2002, but at that time, the church said there wasn't enough evidence to call what happened sexual abuse. So for 3 months, CBS News tried to get an interview with Cardinal Daniel DiNardo, Archbishop over the Texas Diocese. However, they were unsuccessful.
Well, then in late fall, CBS News reporter Nikki Batiste tracked Cardinal DiNardo down and asked him whether Father Keller and another accused priest would be on the list. Cardinal DiNardo said Keller was not a credible one and did not give any further information about the list, excusing himself from the camera very quickly.
As the report aired, another man who knew Father Keller was watching. Mark Quinn told CBS News Father Keller was his boogeyman and had touched him inappropriately at the age of 8. Quinn, now 50, had never told anyone his secret before. After seeing John Labonte's story, he also decided to take his allegations to the church, but doubted there would be a full investigation. He told CBS News there's decades of history within the church at large where they have just refused to do the right thing.
Well, Pope Francis is weighing in on the church sex abuse scandal as he returned from the Catholic World Youth Day rally in Panama City. Now, the Pope told reporters on the papal plane there is too much stock being put into the Vatican summit when he said, quote, "We have to deflate the expectations to these 3 points because the problem of abuse will continue. It's a human problem."
Well, the 3 points he was referring to are his 3 goals for the February 21st through 24th summit. First, to make church leaders across the globe understand the pain sexual abuse inflicts on victims. 2, teach them how to properly investigate reported cases. And 3, develop protocols for the entire church hierarchy to use in any alleged instance of abuse.
Well, the Pope continued by telling reporters the first step is to recognize the issue. He added, in some cases, bishops don't know what to do when they encounter abuse. And that's kind of a strange statement, Catan, because why would they not know what to do if they encountered abuse? And, remember that some of these stories have been broken and exposed, that it's been all the way to the Vatican saying they themselves have been responsible for the cover-up. So he mentions those 3 points as if, okay, we need to educate them on what they're going to do, but a lot of it was making sure it was covered up.
Right.
And to date, the Pope has not yet acknowledged there is a problem with sexual abuse, even though they paid out billions of dollars to the sex abuse victims.
Right.
Well, no follow-up questions were allowed by the reporters, but his statement does cause one to wonder, what are they doing? Now, the Pope also came out strongly against abortion and gave personal advice to mothers who had gone through aborting their children, telling them to sing lullabies to their children in heaven. And thinking about that statement there, Katan, if it wouldn't be for the obvious grief that the mother is going through because of having aborted their own child, why would he be having to tell them, go ahead and sing lullabies? He knows, the Pope knows that they're suffering because of that choice they made, and he's trying to make it seem like it's going to have an effect.
Sing a lullaby. It's more of a placebo effect.
Right.
Well, other topics Pope Francis covered were celibacy of priests, which he believed was important, and also that schools should provide students with sex education. Someone said that they should probably provide the priest with sex education to make them aware of how to conduct themselves when they're around children who are entrusted in their care. Finally, he talked about the ongoing crisis in Venezuela. While he wasn't taking sides, he was fearful there would soon be a bloodbath.
Well, it's very interesting that the Pope talked about abortion on his trip home. There is a heated debate right now in the U.S. concerning third trimester abortions. Now, some in the legislature are even saying their bill would allow for abortion to take place during and after the birth. Now, take a look at this video and some of the arguments going back and forth.
How late in the third trimester could a physician perform an abortion if he indicated it would impair the mental health of the woman?
Or physical health.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm talking about the mental health.
So, I mean, through the third trimester. The third trimester goes all the way up to 40 weeks.
Okay. But to the end of the third trimester.
Yep. I don't think we have a limit in the bill.
So, where it's obvious that a woman is about to give birth, she has physical signs that she is about to give a birth, would that still be a point at which she could request an abortion if she was so certified?
Mr. Chairman, that would be a decision that the doctor, the physician, and the woman would make.
I understand that. I'm asking if your bill allows that.
My bill would allow that, yes.
Yeah. I'm sure you describe yourself as pro-choice. I bet a lot of people watching right now think of themselves as pro-choice. So I'm not attacking you for that. But I wonder what you think of what Dr. Northam, the governor of Virginia, just said, that when a child, he described the child as an infant, is born, there's a point where the mother and the physician can decide whether to kill the infant or not. What do you think of that?
Look, Tucker, I understand that you want to go back to a time where Roe v. Wade was illegal, where women were having back alley abortions, and they were using coat hangers to have abortions, which is actually what's barbaric.
I'm giving you time to make a real argument. I'm not arguing for the repeal of Roe v. Wade. I'm a very straightforward person.
That is what you're essentially saying.
Actually, no, that's not what I'm arguing. And please don't be tiresome. The governor of Virginia, who's a rising star in the Democratic Party, just said this. There's pending legislation that mirrors it, and I'm asking you what you think of it. That's it. I'm not here to debate Roe v. Wade.
I think that right now, reproductive health care is under attack by the Republican Party. 72% of Americans support the right to choose, and yet we have Trump and we have sexual predator Kavanaugh trying to repeal Roe v. Wade and trying to take away our control over our own bodies. This isn't about babies. This isn't about health care. This is about you attempting to control women's bodies.
Okay, please don't be a robot. Monica, you're smarter than that. This is the governor of Virginia just saying this. I just want to know what you think of it. Is that okay? Does that bother you? It's a sincere question. This just happened.
Okay, it bothers me that you are attempting to control women's bodies. Right now, there are 7 states where there's only 1 abortion clinic. Okay, there are 4 states with trigger bans where we would, if Roe v. Wade is repealed, women cannot get reproductive health care. This is about a woman's right to choose, and you, as a man, should not have a single say in that.
Wow. Do you think that you're making a case that most people agree with, that it's okay to abort a child in the third trimester
Tucker,
for
you
no...
can keep trying to put words in my mouth and keep trying to say that the Democratic Party is hurting children.
I have
but
to
your
say,
party is the one that is tearing families apart at the border and allowing children to die in federal custody. So whose party is actually harming children?
Wow. Let me just ask you one quick question. I mean, this is obviously a pointless conversation, and I think less of you after, I have to say.
I already think
but
less of you, so don't
it's an honest question. Have you thought about it? Do you have a real answer to what the governor of Virginia said, or are you going to throw yet another talking point at me? I mean, have you actually thought about it? Will you answer that question at all?
I have thought about it, and I am telling you that your party is attempting to change the conversation about Roe v. Wade and take control over women's bodies. I'm sorry that as a man, what you're focused on is controlling women's bodies, but we will not allow you to do that.
This is a child who's been born. This is not a woman's body. This is an independent person.
It just confuses me why you pretend that you have concerns over children when you're completely fine with ICE tearing families apart and children dying in federal custody.
Monica, thank you.
Katan, they mentioned there, not thinking at all about the woman's health, but what about the child there? Who's considering the child?
Right. Losing the child is losing their lives, you know, as a result of a choice that someone is making. I mean, really, at that point, if a person wanted to, they could just give the child up for adoption. There's a lot of couples who cannot conceive but would love to have a child. Why not do that?
Great point.
Why abort them? Well, while the U.S. has legalized abortion, which by definition is the deliberate termination of human pregnancy, they have not legalized inhumane killing of animals, as we'll see in our next story. Yes, 3 Abilene teenagers were arrested after a video emerged on Facebook of a chicken being doused in some type of flammable liquid and then set on fire. The 3 teens, 18, 17, and 16, are under investigation as they were seen in the video laughing as the chicken was running around on fire and then died.
Well, the 2 older teens, Jaden Blake and Kaylin Christopher, have been charged with cruelty to animals, and bond is set at $5,000 for each. Now, the 16-year-old was also sent to a juvenile detention center. This kind of behavior really gets communities upset, as the local TV station had a lot of people actually commenting and discussing the incident on their own Facebook page.
And like I said, it's, criminal to harm an animal, but not to harm a human. That seems to be the consensus right now. Sad. Well, not a day goes by where President Donald Trump doesn't send out some tweets, and lately there have been many, from criticizing Fox News reporters about their coverage of the government shutdown to telling former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz he shouldn't run for president. But even more eye-catching than these was his tweet, quote, "Numerous states introducing Bible literacy classes, giving students the option of studying the Bible. Starting to make a turn back? Great," end quote.
Well, RT News recently asked Andrea Kaye, a TV radio personality, if Trump's tweet was an attempt to gain back support from his base. Well, she gave her thoughts, saying, "I think he understands that there has been a move to change the culture away from Judeo-Christian values and principles and to replace God with state." Now, President Trump is wanting to give an option to kids in schools to learn the Bible. I think it's fantastic, and I think every American should support him.
Interesting. Okay, denied that the president was offering this as something to just to appease voters, but she felt it was more to save the future of our country, which she said depends on the restoration of the rule of law. She concluded by saying we need to understand that the United States was founded on people's, quote, individual responsibility, individual liberty, and understanding that our rights and our laws come from God and not from man.
Interesting comments that Ms. Kaye said there. I hope many people feel the same way, but it's interesting that she actually acknowledged the laws or the rules coming from our Creator and using that to govern mankind.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's very evident that when there are no rules, then there's chaos. Because people just do whatever they feel is right.
Well, oftentimes, United States policy is based on assessments from the government intelligence agency. Now, this week, during a congressional hearing, America's top intelligence officials publicly disagreed with President Trump on the biggest threats to the country's security. And Katan, what's so amazing here is that these officials were handpicked by the president himself. Interesting.
Well, in response, Donald Trump blasted the agency, calling the officials naive, extremely passive, and wrong. Well, Larry King on his show, Politicking, posed this question: if he's not listening to these officials, who is the president listening to for his information? Bill Richardson, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, was asked for his thoughts on the confrontation between intelligence chiefs and the president.
Well, Mr. Richardson responded, well, this is unprecedented. A president not listening to his intelligence people. The intelligence people are those that provide facts and policymakers like the president, like the Secretary of State, the Department of Defense, CIA. It's incredible, he said, that he won't listen. Our intelligence people have budgets over $22 billion. They have satellites, spies, they have drones, they have all kinds of ways to obtain information, and the president is denying the information that goes to these high government officials.
Well, we've talked before about countries dumping the dollar to start dealing in their own currency with countries like Iran to avoid sanctions. Larry McGee has details on these things and what countries are doing to actually kind of work around those sanctions that the United States can't seem to make up their mind who they're going to implement these sanctions on, if they're going to take them off, and if they're going to put them back on. So countries know that they need to do something. Larry, what do you have for us regarding that?
The U.S. is continuing to encounter difficulties in its efforts to subdue and annex the oil-rich nation of Iran, even from among some of its European allies who are working to create alternative methods of payment to assist the ancient Persian nation in circumventing U.S. sanctions. France, Germany, and the UK are establishing a special non-dollar payment system for Iran called the Instrument in Support of Trade Exchanges, and the move is being viewed as a direct affront to America's sanction power. European diplomats say that the measure won't change things dramatically, but it is an important political message to Iran to show that they are determined to save the JCPOA, and also to the United States to show we defend our interests despite their extraterritorial sanctions. German media reports that the EU has limited the action to humanitarian commodities such as medicine, medical devices, and food, and doesn't presently cover the oil sales, which have been the primary target of U.S. sanctions. Nonetheless, however, President Trump has been clear that as far as he is concerned, it's an either-or proposition, and there is no doing business with America and also doing business with Iran. It is pretty much an understood fact that the business of oil is at the heart of the latest coup in Venezuela, and the propaganda machine is in full swing, pairing democratically elected President Nicolas Maduro to former Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez and labeling them both as selfish and greedy tyrants. National Security Advisor John Bolton has charged both the leaders with avarice and believes that it is important for America to get involved due to severe misappropriation of the country's oil revenues and large-scale disrepair with regard to its civil infrastructure. It is for these reasons that the advisor says the president has extended recognition to Juan Guaido, but the coup up until now has been unsuccessful because President Maduro still has the loyalty of the nation's military. The enemies of the besieged leader, however, believe that the military's motivations are actually more monetary, and so they are now focusing on ways to limit the president's access to the country's finances, with the idea that the loss of a check might translate into a loss of the military support. In a telling statement, Security Advisor Bolton recently stated on the matter that it will make a big difference to the United States economically if they could have American oil companies really invest in and produce the oil capabilities of Venezuela. The advisor believes that that would be beneficial for the people of Venezuela and America, and that both nations have a stake in having the current developments come out the right way. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, Katana, was interesting comments there by the National Security Advisor, Mr. John Bolton. As he mentioned, we're going to be looking at the oil assets. We're going to be watching that. And remember that Venezuela has the largest oil reserves of anyone. So a great deal of oil is, you know, it may be not directly spoken of, but the U.S. involvement is certainly has to do with that oil.
Yeah, and as we're going to hear in a little bit, some of the members of the government, Maduro's government in Venezuela, they're aware of the fact of the United States' desire for that. It's not really an untapped resources, but it's a very large resource, and the United States' hand in that pot has been kind of small up to this point, but of course more is better.
They're recognizing
in their minds.
it, but they're saying you better keep your hands off. Well, continuing in Venezuela, the Bank of England is not allowing the Maduro government to have access to its gold reserves that the bank is holding for Venezuela. Now, Richard Wolff, co-founder of Democratic at Work, said that the move is problematic and that it's not for the Bank of England to pick who it's going to give money to. They can't continue to be the neutral place to put your money, which many, many countries do.
Well, they seem to be under the thumb, under the United States, he said, who's telling them, that is the Bank of England, what to do. So that should be a signal to any nation that has any difficulties with the United States that they should get their money out of England, out of London, because that's not a safe place as it once was.
Well, Venezuela's vice president has accused the U.S. government of trying to destabilize the Latin American country in order to get access to its oil. Well, she said in a rally to a crowd of supporters that the mask has been removed from the president, vice president, and the national security advisor, who have all said that they are coming for our oil. And what is our response? Yankees, hands off our oil industry. You will not return to govern Venezuela and to take our oil.
Now, the country has protests taking place since Juan Guaido has declared victory in the recent election. Maduro supporters said Guaido is a puppet for the U.S. government, and recently Washington placed sanctions on the state-owned oil company, which has in effect halted millions of dollars a day of oil sales to the U.S.
Well, former U.S. Congressman Ron Paul said of Venezuela's Maduro that he won't walk away from his office easily and that this can end up in violence and a civil war. Now, people who might not like Maduro won't like us, referring to the U.S., settling the dispute. It's internal, and I think they should settle it, he said. I think it's rather ironic for our country to say we have to take care of Venezuela because they're not democratic, and we have to take care of it by an authoritarian approach, by us installing a president and having a coup, and threaten them with violence because they're not democratic enough.
Interesting. He concluded by saying that every time we go in and say that you need help, you need to be Americanized, you need to know our good values, and we want you to learn what democracy is all about, and we'll even throw you a little money if you obey us. And it's always that little tease that's added on to that. And Jeff, that seems to kind of be the protocol of the United States involving itself in other countries' governments.
Well, former Israeli police chief Rouhani Yosher spoke at a conference in Tel Aviv and said that it's hard for him to envision the situation in which the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is not indicted for bribery in the corruption cases against him. Yosher has handled 3 cases against Netanyahu, and that the Prime Minister has hired private attorneys to investigate the charges against him, and mentioned that he himself has received threats, but didn't say that they were on behalf of Netanyahu as he investigated the charges against Netanyahu.
Interesting. Well, with just weeks before the Israeli elections, Israeli Attorney General is expected to give his recommendations on whether to put the Prime Minister on trial or not.
Well, lastly, as China's military gains strength, its use of ground troops is expected to get smaller. Now, its land-based army size has been reduced by nearly 50%. The PLA, or People's Liberation Army, said that the strategic shift is designed to modernize the force. Now, they want to put more focus on sea, air, and cyberspace. Now, for the first time, the land-based force will be outnumbered by the Navy, air, and cyber forces. So the Army composes less than 50% of the military because of the redundant combat units.
Even with this latest move, China's military will still remain the world's largest, with over 2 million serving men and women. In May of 2018, President Xi encouraged the military to boost training and gave massive military spending hikes to modernize China's military forces. And of course, that's exactly what the military did. They recently launched a mock ICBM attack against an unspecified fortified enemy. But China has a no first use policy when it comes to nuclear weapons.
Well, a military expert told China Times, as China promises never to use nuclear weapons first, their missile storage facilities must be able to survive the first wave of hostile nuclear attacks. According to several state reports, China plans to deploy mid-range ballistic missiles that could destroy U.S. aircraft carriers approaching Chinese waters by 2020.
Wow. Well, Jeff, it's evident that the nations are getting one step closer to nuclear war. And of course, as we mentioned, I think it's about a year ago when they advanced the doomsday clock from 2.5 minutes to midnight to 2 minutes to midnight, mankind is not making moves in the right direction. Not morally, as we talked a little bit about the abortions, not politically, as you can see a lot of division amongst not only nation to nation, but within our own nation. There's a lot of division within our own President Trump's administration. There's a lot of division, and so with the mindsets of these people, it's pretty easy to see that we are moving, one step closer to war, not only on a global scale, but just kind of within the breakdown of our own communities, and that's pretty sad.
Right, and that is backed up by the scientific world because, as you mentioned, those board of the ones that oversee that atomic time clock, they didn't back it up. They kept it where it is, and they see that mankind, and of course it's through the technology, but also the military development isn't going in the right direction. That's why it keeps getting closer to midnight.
And speaking of backing up, these reports that we're bringing do that very thing. They back up the prophecies that are found in the Holy Scriptures that were written thousands of years ago. And Israel Hawkins has been, for the longest time, preaching about these very things and warning mankind what the Scriptures show is going to take place, that these things are not just happening, they're a result of mankind's activities, and that if mankind would get back to the set of laws that are found in the Holy Scriptures, as President Trump was proposing, getting these Bibles back in the school Bible. There, then we could actually start to turn this situation around, and then we'll have war no more.
Well, if you'd like to find out more about these stories and others, you can contact the House of Yahweh, and when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Here's how. To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at The House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites, Yahweh.com, YeshuaHawkins.com, or Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can also visit our website at YPNnews.com. If you would like to email the House of Yahweh, you can do so by emailing info@Yahweh.com. Any international calls, please call the number that's on your screen. Once again, please check out the two greatest Bible study tools on the market today, the Israel Says program by going to YisraelSays.com and the Ask Israel program by going to AskYisrael.com. They're completely free and guaranteed to answer your scriptural questions. Go to the search, type in what you're looking for. You'll find pages and pages of helpful information to answer any scriptural question you have.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next, Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Hammerman.
Thank you for watching.